do ya, Wichita, do ya, hey.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for making it here to Our Women Speak, Our Women Now. I'm Jody Harbour.
I'm Sherry Savo.
I'm Valky.
And we have somebody else joining us shortly. We have Karen.
Patricia Dahlben. She's our religious studies consultant for Halton Catholic. Hello.
Hey, you look beautiful.
Thank you. So do you. I miss you.
I miss you. It's so exciting.
You've done a wonderful job.
Thank you so much.
I'm honored to be here.
Oh, thank you, Patricia. It's always been, it's such a pleasure to always have you with us and join us and support us. And we called you here not only to be with us and witness this amazing opportunity, but also to lead us in prayer, because we have 5 other Catholic school boards that are participating in this as well. So if you don't mind, would you mind leading us in prayer then?
I would be honored.
Thanks, Patricia.
My name is Patricia Dahlben, and I am the Religion, Family Life, and Arts Consultant at the Halton Catholic District School Board. This is the region we know today as Halton. It is the land of the Anishinaabe and the Attawandaron and the Haudenosaunee and the Métis. These are treaty lands on which I stand, and I thank the Mississaugas of their credit for being stewards of this traditional territory, and I witness their presence and importance in our community. I'm a settler, the daughter of immigrants. I'm a woman and the mother of a girl. I see and know that Indigenous women and girls have dignity, and I stand in solidarity with Indigenous communities and people seeking justice and reconciliation. This graph gives us an idea of how many women and girls have been taken. As a community of faith, we are required to understand our role not only in the past, but in the future of Indigenous peoples. We stand in solidarity today as an expression of our true faith, a faith that calls us to love and recognize the inherent dignity of all, but especially of those who are persecuted. And today we remember missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. These are just a few of the faces of the Indigenous women and girls who have gone missing and murdered. Take a moment to look at them and know them. Take a moment to imagine you recognize one of the images: mother, friend, sister, daughter, neighbor. Our lives and dignity are intertwined. Brothers and sisters, all of us, let us lift up in prayer the many missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Mother Mary, we call on you to be the protector of all Indigenous women and girls, you who understands deeply the pains of motherhood and the loss of a child. Ignite in us a new awakening of the sacredness of women and girls. We ask this through your Son, Jesus Christ, our Lord. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Dear Lord, we are a broken people. We don't understand. There is no sense to the brutality endured by Indigenous women and girls. We are sad and angry and distraught. Be with us today as we commit to making this world a safe place for Indigenous women and girls. Give us wisdom to make changes in our systems and spaces. Give us hearts of strength and compassion to encounter the truth. Lift up each woman and girl into your light. Let their lives be a reminder of inherent dignity, gifted by the Creator. Remind us that they were taken, but never forgotten. Bring healing, justice, and reconciliation to their families and friends and community. Gather us as one people to right this wrong. Let the winds of change come forth through the gifts of the Holy Spirit as she whispers into our hearts and minds, and as we become change makers. We ask all of this through Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. Let us never forget. Let us reconcile. Let us love and be united in justice. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Patricia. It was beautiful, and it just kind of sets the tone for our morning, and we really appreciate you being here with us. We want to introduce Naomi. Naomi Martin is one of our. Her and her husband have a company called Tribal Vision, and we want to introduce Naomi because Naomi is going to do a jingle dress dance for us, and that is like a healing dance. So we want as much awakening and as much awareness as we possibly can in the 2 hours. So, Naomi, I think you're there. So,
I think she just popped off.
Oh, did she pop off?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't see her in the waiting room, but while we wait for her to pop back in, I think we can just acknowledge some of our partners that have supported us through all of this. Oh, here's Naomi. She's important. And she always supports us. Scano.
Hi, Naomi.
Hi.
You just have to share your video, and
We're excited to see you.
Oh, hello there.
Hi.
Hello.
oh, there we go. Almost.
Back up a bit more.
Back up a bit more. There.
Keep going. Her head's there somewhere.
Oh,
Oh,
There we go.
amazing.
there we go. How's that?
No, just a little bit up. We
A
need
little
to
bit
see
up.
her.
We need to see to her head. There we
There
go.
we go. But down. We need to see her feet for sure.
Would it help if I turn the camera sideways?
Maybe. Give it a try.
We'll see if it'll.
No, but we can. Oh, there.
Oh, yeah. Perfect.
There we go.
Hi, Derek.
Hi.
Thanks for
Okay.
joining us.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Did you want to do an intro into the song at all, Derek, or the dance? I'm sorry, the healing dance.
Marianne?
We're going to share with you the jingle dress dance.
Are we all set?
Yes. Thank you.
Alrighty, here we go.
Neela, we'll see you soon, Derek.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So, again, thank you. We'll move on to the next part of our event, which is very powerful. The work that we've done with the grandmothers and the Indigenous women in our community. And so the last couple of weeks, we've been preparing our community for this event by working with our community partners and making sure that talking about something that's so difficult to talk about is, I want to say the word palatable. We have to share these truths with our youth and our children and our families and be able to handle the conversation, but support the people that are hearing this information. And so we're really lucky that we have our friends like Val King and the grandmothers that we work with that can support the work that we're doing, bringing this awareness into our community and our schools. So thank you, Val, for everything that you do and how you share in our community, teaching us urban Indigenous women, because, that's Sherry and I, right? Yeah. And just learning about our culture for the first time, sometimes some of the stuff that we've learned. So I don't know if you want to just talk a bit about what we've done in the last couple of weeks.
Well, yeah, like doing something like this really requires an awful lot of planning and coordinating, and especially during COVID. But we want it to be very, very meaningful. And so we've gathered an awful lot of people for the next 2 hours, just so that we can dive into some of the things that we know, but our community, we're obligated as a educational institution to be also teaching our students about the realities that are happening in Canada and especially with Indigenous people, and it's a very difficult time to talk about some of these things. But so we've really done an awful lot of preparing and things like that. But yeah, it's been very, very meaningful.
And I want to thank both of Jody and Sherry for all the work that they've done in the Halton area, with starting with Grandmother's Voice and everything that came together in the last little while concerning missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. So welcome.
Thank you. So just to kind of lead you into what we're going to share with you right now, we, for the first time, gathered some grandmothers and Indigenous women from everywhere from London, Windsor area to Niagara Falls, and we gathered yesterday at Crawford Lake in one of the longhouses there, and it was magical. And I really hope that what we share with you right now, you will feel the words that these women share right in your soul and in your heart, because there's nobody out there that lives and speaks from a vibration like this. So enjoy.
Sego, Sewakwego. I greet you in the language of my father's language, because you see, when I was growing up, both my grandmothers were residential. And so I learned Mohawk before I learned my mom's lineage, and that is a Cougar Bear. You see, she was colonized, and so I have given back. I have given it back to them, knowing who they truly are. So I am Cougar Bear, and I like to acknowledge all the women that are here today. I like to thank all our ancestors for enabling us to be here today, for their resilience. I speak from the past, and I also speak from my auntie, my father's sister, because she had left to go and find a job outside of the reserve. But she never returned. And my grandmother was broken. My grandma really believed that something happened to her, because she would never desert her family. My grandma had always asked about her. And because she knew the last picture we have of her, you saw the love she had for my father, who was the youngest at that time, and her mother and her father. And so you see, this has been my journey, is to bring her home, and doing that, I make this journey of sharing the knowledge. A long time ago, in the beginning of our creation story, the woman came first. And from that woman came a lot of nurturing. That nurturing was to help us to overcome a lot of challenges that we have. And so in our way, nurturing was the core of our fire, our being. And so that came in all of us because of her. The nurturing of the land, the nurturing of the people, the nurturing of creation, the nurturing of all relationship. And so this is where it began. Because when she came here, that first woman, she was without. And so that teaches us of grief. Because when she was in a place where there was the sky world we talk about, she was given all this understanding so that when she came here, she would help the people, her children. And so everything that you see here was a contribution of sharing, of nurturing. You see, everything that is here is of the natural world. Nothing was in a way that would harm other creation. The animals, they give their lives because that's their instructions. And our instruction was always to be grateful and to be thankful, because that's what she did, the first woman. Because of her experience of being here without a family, without a home, without shelter, without food, the animals came forth and shared that with her. And so she made that commitment at that time to support all creation, because they give of themselves for our survival. And so she had taught us how to love unconditionally, how to be so generous with our kindness and our goodness, because everything of the natural world give us shelter, give us food, give us medicines, give us everything that we needed. And so woman was looked upon with high regard. Everyone was taught that she was the first teacher, because she taught while you were in the womb. She taught of good things because her place of her mind was in a good way. And so she gave birth to goodness and kindness. Throughout the years, she had been sharing those teachings. And it is with much sadness that we had to learn about grief also. But not to be on, as they say, to be caught off guard. We knew that tears were important. We knew that friendship was very important. And so we have created many of our belts. We have created belts to remind us, because even the peacemaker, he came and he shared that. He got us ready because he knew that the people that were going to come, were very filled with a lot of grief. They had lost their spirit. And so the Creator had sent us another messenger, and we called him the peacemaker. And so the peacemaker, he gave us our instruction. And one of the things he did was he restored the position of the woman. He asked for the woman, this woman that had fallen from grace, and he lifted her up. He lifted her up. And he said, now you will have a new name. You will be the holder of all those that are come. You will be the one that gives the names. You will be the one. And so he was reminding her of her instructions again. And she was the one to choose the leaders. She was the one to remind the leaders that there was one of the things, when she chose a chief, there was never to be any abuse of any woman, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritual. And so you see, it's been in our way, in our instructions, how it was to be a long time ago. So this clan, beginning of our leadership, and the women would know who to choose, because they watched their young men, they watched their children, they watched those that had lots of the nurturing. And so they would choose these men to help build a healthier and a safer community for the men, for the people. So along the way, we were given instructions how to restore our spirit. But there was going to come a time when things would be challenging. And that things, they say in our way, our people would fall asleep. They said they would fall asleep and forget their original instruction. And so our men were very protective. They went out and they tried to prevent a lot of the chaos that was coming, the burning of the villages, the traumas that they were going to be seeing. And so these men would come home and their hearts was broken, their spirit was broken, because what they saw was violence being done to the women and the children. These were the people that came across because they were so saddened because they had lost their spirit. And so they were hurting one another, and it hurt our people to see this. And so we had created ceremonies to help them, because what our men saw, they didn't want to give it to their children. They wanted to protect those children. And so we have ceremonies to release that grieving that they saw, release that pain. And this is what men have gone through when they have gone to wars. All those wars that we've had, nobody has taken care of their spirit when they have returned home. And so this is why we are here today. And so I shared that story. The coming of grief, the coming of violence, the coming of broken hearts and broken spirits. And so I say, to them, I want to say thank you. I acknowledge all of those that have come before us, that have been through great pain, and that we are here to share this story of their lives. We come here to bring that awareness of restoring. You see, when we see pain, we're supposed to help one another, not to take each other down. We're not supposed to destroy. Men are not supposed to destroy the women, not to destroy the children. And the women, we are to stand together. We are not to bring down each other. So this is almost like what the ancestors have been waiting for this day. And so I want to acknowledge those ancestors, all those people that came before us, because we are here today because of them. I say, Aho, Yawa, Miigwech.
Bojo, Wabaskisko Nikan Kaya Tabit, Nishnakaz, Makododam, Dunjaba, Lenape Nation, Lenni Lenape, Nishnawbe Koyan Dao. And what I said is my spirit name means polar bear woman who's looking ahead. And the extension of that name is from the waters. And that's part of what our grandmother Renee was sharing about, and what was taught to me by my grandmothers and my aunties is the understanding of who my role and responsibility is taking care of that water and sharing that understanding what that water really means to that wholeness of who we are as body, mind, heart, and spirit. I'm Bear Clan. And the nation I come from is near Thamesville, Ontario. It's the Lenape Nation, but also, because we follow the matriarchy system, the Lenape people. My mom is Anishinaabe. She's from Cape Croker, around the Georgian shore, and she's the reason why I'm here. Because I'm second residential school survivor. And this amazing, the waters that I come from is not only from my mom, my grandma, my great-great-grandma, my great-great-grandma. All of that lineage of that ancestral blood and cells and all of those things is who I am. And that is who I am today. And I continue to walk in that good way of that good life. And what we talk about is that Minabawadzoan. And I'm here to talk and share about, you know, the life that that brought me to this sobriety, this red road, this wellness. And it went way back when I was in 2002, 2004. I was placed in, it was a placement in an institution with the Native Brotherhood. And I was working with the Native Brotherhood and never understood why a creator, you know, I just knew you don't ask questions, you just go with the flow like water, like us women, what we learn to do. And there I am working with the Native Brotherhood, understanding and working with the healing and wellness of our men and learning more and more of, you know, that our men were labeled as perpetrators, and that understanding they too have been victimized. They have been part of that racial profiling. They've been part of the, you know, the brutality within the criminal justice system. And the more and more I started listening to their stories, the more and more I gained a greater understanding that importance of my role as an auntie and as a sister back then is that who is going to advocate and speak on them? Who's going to advocate and take care of them? You know, those are our sons. Those are uncles. Those are grandfathers. My role not only is to be teaching and sharing what it is, that role and responsibility, being that woman and teaching those little girls, those, you know, their roles, their wandering stage, their roles, their strawberries, their water, and what that all means. But also my role as a grandmother today is to help there to be there for our brothers, our uncles, and our grandfathers. And so, and as I carried on and walked this good road, I started to, it took me to a healing lodge, and I worked there for about 12, 13 years. And there I was again, working with our brothers. And, you know, and I sat with those grandmothers, and I sat with those grandfathers, and I says, here I am, you know, one of those things that I recognize, because we're giving a gift and purpose in the beginning of time before we come here. And the more and more I started understanding my gift and purposes. And one of those gifts is to be able, that ability to work with our brothers. And I started working with them and understanding them and sitting with them, and, you know, that whole piece of how they were labeled, that whole piece, you know, that how can I help them as a grandmother to understand their roles and responsibilities, that understanding of who they are, you know, and tending that fire. And that's not my place to teach them with that tending the fire, but it is my place as a grandmother to take them to that, to those healthy men, to show them and teach them. And, you know, and it's so, the more and more as I walk through my life and this good life, learning more, traveling and understanding, as my bundle carried me to so many different ceremonies, because I had to understand me too. Because that important role, and as an Askabekwe, is to look inside of myself and heal inside of myself too. Because how can we heal others if we don't heal ourselves? So, you know, walking this journey and sitting in those men's circles, because I didn't intrude, I was invited. I was welcomed. And, you know, many, you know, that balance. You know, and I can share one inspiring young man. He says, you know, I have an uncle up in James Bay area. They did an apology walk. They did an apology walk because these men got clean and sober, and they wanted to make direct amends. And so what came in that apology walk is apologizing to those women that they've hurt in the past. Apologizing to making that direct amends, not only to those women that they hurt, but to their grandmothers and to their aunties and their little sisters and nieces. So they did it. They did it, and they walked. And they walked, and they walked, and they walked, and men gathered all along. And so what came to them was not only apologizing to the women that they heard and so forth, but apologizing that healing of our Mother the Earth, that water, our grandmother. You know, it was such a beautiful, impacting story and teachings for them, because we talk about reciprocity, that big word that I learned in school. But it's that giving and receiving, you know, that circle, giving and receiving. So when I shared about that 14-year-old boy, you know, he goes, I want to do that. We need to do that here in Ontario. And so you know what? They did it. They got together and they walked all along the St. Clair River. They had a woman there. They had a grandma there too. See, we're part of that circle. They carried that water and they walked and they walked. They prayed, you know, cried, they sang. You know, they even had women in Walpole Island that met those men, and they sang those water songs for them. They sang those healing songs for them. And it was just such a beautiful journey to be part of that, because that's where I knew my purpose and gift was to be. And so they came into this big child well-being gathering, and it was all women, and women just surrounded this great big gathering place. These men came to the fire, they got ready, they had their water, they had a little bit of snacks, and then it was their time. They have a place in that circle too, eh? So they walked in one at a time, and all of them, they all walked to each grandma, each sister, you know, and each, you know, auntie, and they all either got hugged and they all got embraced. You know, they got honored for the work that they've done, you know. And so so that 14-year-old's vision, his dream came true, and it continues on to this day. The men are planning another walk. Again, they invited me into a circle called I'm a Kind Man in London. And they said, you know, we want to do a gathering, because with this COVID-19, they had to have a virtual gathering. But there was one thing missing, because when I was sitting with them in the circle, they said, we need to continue that walk. So there's a Shining a Light program happening, a Shining a Light project in November. And so I sat with some of the coordinators, and my cousin Dennis, he goes, well, we're going to do it anyway, whether they approve it or not. You know, of course, absolutely. But we have that support. So our men are going to do their apology walk again. They're going to pass that sacred bundle, and they're going to carry those sacred bundles. There's going to be a grandmother carrying that water, and that's going to be ongoing. That's why I'm here to share, because the importance of our men and the importance that they too have a place in that circle. And you know, whether they were they're you know, that perpetration, or whether they were victimized. You know, I could sit here and talk about the whole research that I've done in regards to the data that was collected and all those things. But I think what comes to me, I believe what comes to me is that understanding the importance of that balance. You know, us grandmothers come together and we share about that. We talk about that. We talk about the importance of who we are as women. And that is so, so important. But what is really just as equally as important is that those men have a place in that circle too. You know, that they too have been victimized. They too have been part of that. You know, that whole, when you look, that homicide, and you know, and I believe that we need more research. We need more media, you know, and knowing that our brothers are out there missing too. And there are part of those things. And so for that, I have to say, thank you, Miigwech, for listening. Kanagana, all my relations.
Adabari Kuchida Kwayamukwa Doram, Mississaugas of the New Credit, First Nation. What I said was, my name is She Who Speaks the Truth, Woman Warrior Leader, and I'm from Mississaugas of the New Credit, and I'm Bear Clan. Another name that I carry is Rainbow Kwe Woman. So my name has evolved or it's unusual sometimes to have 2 or 3 names. And another name that I carry is, in the Lakota people, is She Protects Mother Earth. So I've got that name when I was sick, and then this name when I did my Sundance, because they recognize the work that I do with healing, the healing that I do with the people. So for me to be able to do healing, and as many people know, when you go through hardships, you learn things. It's not fun at the time, but it gives you a perspective, compassion for others if they're going through the same thing, like a loss of a child, a broken marriage, violence, beatings, a gun to your head, witness of abuse, sexual abuse, being abused. So those are some of the stories that I can share and be witness of also within my community and other communities. And so my healing has brought me to this space of helping other women. And I too, like Tracy, have gone to OCI. I worked there for 6 months, but the men, I was scared to death because I didn't know whether I could help them or I was able to be a good helper there. But I got to a different understanding of what exactly was needed, because my perpetrators were men and some are Indigenous, but the high rate of Indigenous missing and murdered women is over 4,000. It's not really 500 or 1,200 as the RCMP talk about. It's over 4,000 in our database. Our database is in our hearts. Our database is in our stories. These are the stories that have come together, that the walks that we do from across Nova Scotia to BC. It's probably over 4,500 now. And it's increased. And I've been doing this work for missing and murdered Indigenous women and families as an advocate for over 15 years. And it's increasing. It's disheartening to say it's increasing, and it's not decreasing. And I asked in ceremony, because I felt so down, I asked, what else can I do for the families? What else can I do for our people? And the answer was to keep singing, to keep dancing, and to keep feasting. And I said, anything else? And the Spirit said, keep singing, keep feasting, and keep dancing. And then a message came through a writer on Six Nations. She contacted me after the ceremony. And she said, Val, I have a story for you. And she talked about the Longhouse. She talked about this teacher teaching them. And then the rest of the day, they danced. They danced in the classroom, pushing all the dust back. And she spoke a lot of language in this piece that she wrote me. It was 6 pages. She said, I had a dream, and the missing and murdered women came, and they said, write this for Val and give it to her. And she can name it. Give this to her, and she can use this when she goes to speak about the missing and murdered. And the point of that whole thing, what she relayed to me, and I just cried, because I was at a point where I was just gonna give up, because I didn't think I could do the work anymore. And I just cried and cried, because I thought, how did she know how I was feeling? I don't hang out with this girl. I don't hang out with this writer. She, it felt like those women just picked me up by the shoulders like this so that I could go on, because my heart was so heavy with the grief that Renee talks about, that we all carry. None of us are exempt from that grief when one of our sisters go missing, or even our brothers. And the rates may be higher for Indigenous women, but there is high rates for men too, like Tracy's talking about. There is some woman that is doing some research. It's just not out there yet. But anyway, this story, those women knew. And it may be just simple things, keep singing, feasting, and dancing, but if you think about it, when all of these colonial structures happened, You see and hear a lot of things that we have. They're artifacts in here. They're just sitting here. But we used them every day. Every day when we did things. When we went and did the water, when we ate, when we had the fire, when we cooked, when we did medicines, to keep ourselves healthy. They took it all. They took it all from us. They didn't want us to be Indigenous. They didn't want us to practice who we are. They called the men savage, and they called the women squaws. And we still have that name. We still have that name. We're still called that. And we call that racism. We can term it racism in a Western word. I could still term it that way. And some people say, no, there's no racism. It is. It's racism, but it's at a deeper level. So when we gathered, there'd be thousands of drums lined up, thousands of pots lined up, and we'd sing and dance all night. It wasn't, you could maybe call it a party if you want, but it was calling the spirits, it was feeding our spirit. It was recognizing the food. It was calling our ancestors to help us, whatever it was. Maybe it was giving some persons a name, talking about a person's purpose, or the medicines, whatever it was. But to the other Western settlers, we were pagans, or not pagans, or whatever they wanted to call us. So they banned it in those colonial practices. They banned the potlatch, it's called. And everything we do, each food has, we have berries here, we have strawberries here, odamen, and there's a heartberry. Every piece of our ceremonies and our food has a story, has a song, and it has meaning. That odamen, those heartberries, is about love. My one daughter, her name is Ganoyo Hode Sawayahawi, which means she who brings the strawberries. That's her purpose. She brings love to the people. She talks about the love. I brought back to my community strawberry rites. When a young woman gets her first moon time, the women gather for a year. We have a fire. We talk about sexuality. We talk about relationships. We talk about putting her hair up, not carrying babies that don't walk, so she don't long for them. We take her through that whole thing, teaching her, loving her, and then at the end she goes for a fast and comes out and be recognized as a woman. But she cannot eat those berries. She can make sweet things, but she can't eat them. She has to give them to the community. And when she sees the berries, if she was here, if one young woman here was on her moon time, she would instinctively get up and get those berries and say, here you go. Here's in these beautiful berries, and look at these berries. They're so loving. They represent that love. When you break them open, it's all the stars in there and the Milky Way and how everything is connected. They're shaped like the heart. It's a lot of medicines. It's blood medicine. When someone's sick, that's what they used to take to them, is the strawberries. When I had circles in my home, when I start gathering people in my home, the elders, they're all passed now. My grandma said that's what they would do. They would bring the berries, and when they were sick, they would break that strawberry right here on their third eye. And she would talk about it. She would talk the language when she'd come. She'd talk about the teachings. But in a community, when we'd be doing things, she would become silent, like this, like these masks. She wouldn't answer me. She wouldn't answer me about different questions because she was fearful. She didn't want to pass me those teachings. She didn't want me to get harmed because she went to residential school. So she still was living that. And my aunties. And so in my dreams and things like that, I helped her. I did her feast for her when she passed. She came to me. So she helped me in return. So that's this feasting, this singing and dancing. That's what it's all about. We're helping our relatives behind us and us to go forward. So when we're talking about this, when we're sharing about this, when we're sad, when we're happy, they're healing behind us, our ancestors. And when we're going forward, we're helping my children, our children, to move forward and pick up their bundles. We have some of our bundles here. I have a bag here that a man had a fire for over 60 days for missing and murdered Aboriginal women. I have a hard time giving this one away because he had this at the fire, and he's tobacco in here praying for the women, and he's known to keep the fire for circles for the women. And I think of my 6 girls and my son, making a better place for young girls in our community. We had a suicide in our community about a month and a half ago. And some of these things that are rampant in our First Nations, it's the root cause of all of these things. Our people just don't wake up and say, I'm going to be an alcoholic today. I think when I'm 21, I'm going to kill myself. I think I'm going to go to the hospital and be racialized today. I talked yesterday about the situation of the recent murder of a friend or a woman, and it was in a hospital. Some people don't want to look at it, but it's there, and more outrage is happening. And I remember, 2006 when I was in school at McMaster, and I was actually going to present on missing and murdered Aboriginal women that week. And when I went to go, a woman in my community was murdered, and I got to class. I took the newspaper with me, our newspaper, Tekawaniki, which means two voices speaking. It was first started on my First Nation, that newspaper, and I worked for it when I first started my first job. And I had taken that paper there, and I asked the girls in the class, women's studies class, who all heard this story. Not one person put up their hand. And it kind of broke me, because I thought everybody knew about it, and nobody knew nothing. And I started doing my presentation, and then it hit me, because some of the things I was saying was a lot of the systems, a lot of the court systems, the racial slurs that happen is, we don't matter. You don't matter. You're nothing. Women, Indigenous women, are inhumane. We're garbage. We're just a prostitute. We're just this. We just want sex. I found a piece of writing back in the 1600s where the women were so beautiful with our skirts on, picking medicines. Because we're our life givers, like Renee said. We know how to take care of ourselves. We know what medicines to take. So of course somebody's going to be under moon time. Of course somebody's going to have a baby and take the ticknoggin out into the bush. We have to know how to clean ourselves so we don't get sick. So we were doing that. But the writing said, look at those women. They are so mindless, and they are so lusting. They're all on their knees with their skirts on. They want us to come out there and have sex with them. So they did. They went out there and they raped them. You know what they're picking? Western people call it squaw vine. That's where that word came from. But it was something beautiful that they were doing, that they turned into something really ugly. And I couldn't finish my presentation. I couldn't finish it. I did finish it the following week, but I had to take a week off. So that's when I started the vigils in my community. That's when I needed to start doing things more. Then I had to go into the communities and start doing things within the communities to bring these bundles back to our young ones, so they knew who they are. So the men knew who they are and their roles and their responsibilities. I have a grandson that's 14 now. He doesn't have a positive male in his life. His dad, I let him visit him. I have custody of him. But I took him through his passage of rites, and I called my brothers, and I said, come and teach him. Teach him about the fire. Teach him about hunting, cooking, even cooking, hunting with a bow. They didn't be born to say, I want to be a savage, because they're not savages. He's a really beautiful person. I think that's all I want to say right now. Miigwech.
Sego Sewa Fuego. Hello, everyone. Kahtine Nyungyats. Kahtine is my name, and it has that I take a lasso and I throw it over a community or over the forest, and I draw it in. And when you receive your name, you don't always realize exactly what your role and responsibility is, because that's what everyone seeks. Who am I? Who am I supposed to be? And how am I going to get there? Those questions are always asked. And I'm a Bear Clan. I'm Six Nations. I'm from Six Nations, and I'm from the Mohawk Nations, Nyagihaga. And I have 5 children, and I have 13 grandchildren, and my baby's having a baby, so I'm going to have yet another grandchild, come into my family. And I look at the strength of my daughters. I have 3 daughters, and I have 2 sons. And I made sure that they had their language, and I made sure that they had their ceremony and their culture. And they've faced such challenging times, as we all have. Their challenges are a bit different than our grandfathers and our grandmothers, but they're challenges that they've had to face, just like our ancestors have faced. And I had one grandmother who was murdered at Six Nations, and the wrong person was I guess had to pay the price for that. But in that system, they had to blame somebody, so they blamed somebody, and he did some time in jail, and the real perpetrator was never never paid for the crime in that system. Although I believe that whenever you do something and it's something like murder, that you're marked, and you have to live with that all of your life. So at a past ceremony a couple weeks ago, we were working with the dresses, and I touched one dress, and that dress, I knew that it was for the ancestors, my ancestor. Maybe it was for my grandmother, but it was something to do with the family. And I just knew that it was just a split second, that I had that communication with that dress. And I realized something at that point. I realized, the power of, I guess you could call it the power of process, because it was me processing all of those lives. It was like there's a whole string of lives that have been touched, with each of those murders, and they affect our family lines and our family ties. And so I wanted to think about, what is it that we need to do in order to change the energy of these things. So with residential schools, as an example, the residential schools, they were taken down, and we still have the Woodland Cultural Center, which is the one closest to our territory, our nation, or where I live. And I remember when they were going to take it down, they were trying to decide, do we leave up the residential school or do we take it down? And my first thought was, well, take it down, because it represents, something from the past that was negative. And then I changed my mind. I changed my mind because so many people have a connection there. And whether it's a positive connection or whether it's a negative connection, it has to do with energy. How do we change the energy of that situation? The energy is what is going to carry on throughout our generations. And I realized, at that point that the stories had to be told, and that's a freedom for those that had to go through those experiences. And so from that change of energy thought, I had to look at, well, what can we do for our people now? What is the best recourse for our people? And, so we were gifted tobacco, and these happen to be tobacco seeds from this beautiful place that we're at, here at Crawford Lake. And I had to think back to the ancestors, the ancestors left these for us. And these are the stories and the teachings that we need to address. So we're like this tobacco seed. We have been through so much. We've been through different seasons. We've been through different times. We've been through different situations, and we've been through changes in the world, and everything that the world has gone through. These seeds are impacted, and so that represents us as well. So the story is, these seeds also have a spirit and a personality. We look for healing, and when we look for healing, we go to these people who have made it their profession to maybe provide what they can and to help others. And this is what it boils down to. We need to know how to take these seeds, how to nurture these seeds, how to grow these seeds, and how to keep these seeds going for our generations to come. And so we call it the 7 generations. We always have to be aware of our 7 generations coming. And so we plant the seeds, and so that's what we're doing with this project. We are planting those seeds of hope and change, and we want to be those catalysts that are going to help our coming generations to experience a better world. There's so many different ways that we can look at planting seeds, and years and years ago, I saw something that really inspired me, and it was the way that a culture had been lost and then it had been found again. And one of the things that was done was, as soon as you went into their village, they would clean you with smudging, and they would clean you off. They would have someone who could, we call them see. And so we had someone who could look at ways that, you could improve your life. They'd be given medicine, they'd be given what they need, then they'd be given seeds. And the seeds wear their card, meaning, this we give to you. It is up to you to change what you don't like about yourself, to help you grow, to help you heal. And if you plant these seeds, if you nurture, if you put your love and your energy into these seeds, then these seeds are going to grow and you will become well. If you choose not to do anything, then you will not. That's a very powerful message. That's a powerful message because too often we're searching and our answers are right before us. And so what we haven't lost is our connection to that natural world, to the real world. And sometimes it's interesting when we see everyone rushing to the cottage, well, pre-COVID times anyway, rushing to the cottage because they were looking for something. Something was at that cottage, fresh lake or a lake, water. There was just a getting away from it all that they equated with nurturing their minds. And they didn't know what it was, but what happens is you go to that college or to that cottage, and all of a sudden you're free. Free from what? You're free from, your mind has a chance to relax. but you're also free to allow the trees, to allow the plants, to allow the waters, to allow the air, to allow the winged ones, to allow all of those aspects of nature work with us. And spiritually, we are connected to everything. And in these concepts I used to hear, we are one with nature, and it was like, I don't understand. You know, as a child, it's like, you know, what do you mean we're one with nature? But that's how we're one with nature, because we are nature. And our minds really need that focus of the elements in order for our minds to become clear, to become strong, and also to hear the messages that we need to hear in order to make our people stronger again. So when, you know, the colonization process, and it's been many thousands of years that this is going on now, when the colonization process started to affect those peoples in Europe, and then was brought over and, you know, affected our people, there's a process of, I would call it finding yourself, that is the main teacher behind that movement. So there's always something that's trying to take us away from who we are. How do we bring that essence back to ourselves? And the answer has always been simple. It's always been, you walk in nature. You are nature. You are the catalyst for change. And one of the lessons that I guess was really important was the teachings that we have, the teachers that we have in our lives. You know, the schooling that we have, the home that we have, the institutions that we have as teachers. We have a choice to reject or accept any of those things that are being sent our way. And because we have that choice, if we choose change, then how do we do that? Well, we do it by making change through our systems, through our governments, and through those types of things. And so we really do need to work together as not just Indigenous nations, but we also need to work together as one nation. And one nation is what this belt represents. You know, this represents the relationships that we have with all nations. It's the bringing back of the respect and the sharing of our teachings and our knowledge. This is what's going to create that oneness, and this is what's going to make all of us better again, you know. And this comes from the earth, and it's so simple. So I guess my time is up, and I just thank you, all for being able to share these messages, because it's a combined message here. It's a combined message that we're all needed. We all need to be together in order to create that big change for the world. So y'all go.
Whoa. Amazing. It's always heavy work that these women do, bringing the experiences to for us to learn. And so thank you so much to the grandmothers that we spent today. And we're learning technology in the middle of all of this. And so we have Derek with us, and we'd like to bring him to share a song with us for our men. Derek, is he with us?
Yeah, right there.
Here, you can go ahead. That's Derek there?
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everyone.
Hi there.
Derek's going to share with you a grass dance now, so I hope you all enjoy.
Thank you for your dance too, Naomi.
Hey, you're welcome. No.
Woo! Nyawa. Hey, Naomi.
Good to see you again.
Yes, thank you so much. It was beautiful.
Thank you. We'll see you later.
We'll see you in a bit.
And so we've lost a few minutes here because technology loves us so much. But we just wanted to, we had some space in this part right now to talk a little bit about our, what we've seen so far, but we're going to kind of fast forward this because we do have some people waiting in the room and some really important conversations. But if we didn't have our community partners, even in Halton, I know we're talking about Halton, but we have our community partners within the school boards in Niagara, Hamilton, Waterloo
Catholic,
St. Clair, Windsor, and they're in the same situations that we are. You know, everyone's learning, we're learning together, and we've been doing this work for several years, and it's really important that we have the relationships and partners with our partnerships with our community members. And so we have some community members that wanted to share some messages with us and with the rest of their community. So we're going to share that with you right now.
Hi, I'm Pam DeMoff. I'm the Member of Parliament for Oakville North Burlington. I'm also Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Indigenous Services. I'm joining you today on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. And I know that today we're talking about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. It's a tragedy what has happened to Indigenous women and girls across this country. And over the last 5 years, since we were elected in 2015, we have taken a number of steps, of which I'd like to talk about some of them right now. Our government has made investments in housing, in education, and also in the child welfare system, ensuring that kids are not being stripped from their parents. We know that there are far too many children in the child welfare system, and so in the last Parliament we passed Bill C-92, which gives power back to First Nations communities over their children. Those kids who end up in the child welfare system, it's become a gateway into the correctional system. And it's particularly predominant for Indigenous women, who are our fastest growing prison population. So we need to do more. We're working on agreements with the various organizations for funding to make sure that this can be fully implemented. But mentioning corrections, I also want to talk about the criminal justice system, because we know that we've failed Indigenous women and girls. We've seen the number of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls who've come in contact with the criminal justice system, whether they're looking for help, whether they have gone missing and no one goes looking for them. And whether it's the RCMP or police services across the country, we must do better. I've been on the Public Safety Committee as we've been looking at systemic racism in policing. And we know that Indigenous women are disproportionately impacted by the systemic racism that exists in policing, where families will come forward to say that their daughter or their sister or their loved one is missing and no one goes looking for them. So we have made changes, but we certainly need to do more. We changed consent laws in the last Parliament. We introduced Canada's first gender-based violence strategy. We've invested in shelters and transitional housing. And here in Halton, I have to say that we lack services for Indigenous peoples, and we lack services for Indigenous women and girls. We're certainly doing better here in Halton than we were previously, but quite frankly, there's a gap. And so I look forward to working with Indigenous leadership here in Halton to see what we can do to bring services closer. People shouldn't have to go to Toronto or Hamilton in order to access services. And Indigenous women's voices need to be heard. Indigenous girls' voices need to be heard. Part of what we have been doing as a government is working with Indigenous women's organizations across the country to ensure whatever policies we do bring forward reflect the needs and the desires of those organizations who represent Indigenous women across the country. Whether they're Inuit, Métis, or First Nations, we need to make sure that their voices are heard as we develop policies. We must keep Indigenous women and girls safe. They need to have an expectation of safety, and their families have to have an expectation of safety when they say goodbye to their loved one in the morning. They shouldn't disappear. They shouldn't be found later, months, years later, at the side of the road. And so together, working with you, working with Indigenous women's organizations across the country, working with other stakeholders, I look forward to continuing work on this very important issue.
Hello, I'm Superintendent Kevin Mahar, Commander of Regional Investigative Services for the Halton Regional Police Service. The region of Halton is not immune from intimate partner violence, gender-based violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and child exploitation. All of these crimes have a significant and long-term impact on victims and survivors, their families, and the communities in which they work, live, and play. Our police service is committed to addressing and minimizing the impact of these crimes through a strategic approach built on three main pillars. The first pillar is specialized investigative response. Our frontline uniformed patrol officers are trained and equipped to provide timely and, in some cases, emergency response to instances of violence, including sexual assault. Once the initial response is underway, there are specialized detective constables assigned to take over these investigations. These officers are assigned to one of three specialized units: the Child Abuse Sexual Assault Unit, the Intimate Partner Violence Unit, or the Human Trafficking Unit. The officers in each of these units receive training that is unique to their assigned roles. This ensures that a victim survivor receives the most empathetic response possible and paves the way for a competent and thorough investigation. The second pillar of our strategy is our victim-centric approach to investigative response. From the time a victim survivor makes their courageous decision to report to police, their well-being and recovery are the main focus. Investigators work in conjunction with the members of our Victim Services Unit to ensure that the victim survivor receives specialized and personal support regardless of the outcome of the investigation. Supports include access to emergency shelter, clothing, and food, and reference or connectivity to other community supports, as well as safety planning. As much as possible, taking into account provincial and federal directives, victims are given control over the direction and outcome of the investigation. One example of this is the use of a sexual assault information guide. Prior to a victim survivor being interviewed by a police officer, they first meet with a trained member of the Victim Services Unit. During this time, the victim survivor is provided with a guide that outlines the investigative and court process. The Victim Services support worker gives an overview of the process, which informs their decision-making, empowers the victim survivor to take control of the direction of the investigation from the onset. The third pillar of our strategy is ongoing service delivery enhancement through external collaboration. Members of the service have built strong and effective working relationships, both formal and informal, with community members and agencies who work in the field of victim survivor support. Halton Women's Place, the Elizabeth Fry Society, Reach Out Center for Kids are just a few of the community agencies we consider as external stakeholders and collaborators. Through daily interactions, as well as formal committees, such as the Sexual Assault Advisory Committee and the Halton Violence Prevention Council, the service receives vital and timely feedback, which helps to directly shape and refine our response strategies and service delivery. As a service, we do not rely solely on a strong reactive response strategy to address violence in our community. We recognize the importance of comprehensive, preventative strategies designed to address the underlying issues that lead to violence in our community. Our Regional Community Mobilization Bureau delivers a number of programs which are designed to have both short-term and long-term impacts, which will prevent instances of violence and victimization in our community. I hope this brief overview serves to inform you of the level of commitment the Halton Regional Police Services has to ensure the members of our community receive the highest level of service and support possible should they or someone they know unfortunately become a victim of intimate partner violence, gender-based violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, or child exploitation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marianne Buller. I'm coming to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam people, also known as Vancouver, British Columbia. I was a judge here in BC for 22 years and then went on to be the Chief Commissioner for the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. But I'm also a grandma, a stepmom, a sister, an auntie, a niece, a cousin. And I'm also a member of the Mistawasses First Nation in Saskatchewan. I want to thank the Halton Catholic District School Board for inviting me to speak with you today. This is an important time. October 4th is the National Sisters in Spirit Day, also known as the National Day for Action for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls in Canada. I know you've had your own ceremony, and I congratulate you on that. And I also want to acknowledge and thank the grandmothers for leading you in that ceremony, acknowledging our missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. It's time to commemorate their loss and move forward in a good way. I'm going to talk today about the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, our findings of fact and calls for justice. So, turning to the National Inquiry, we commenced our work on September 1st, 2016, and we finished our work on June 30th, 2019. Our terms of reference are very lengthy. I'll paraphrase them. They are to require us to inquire into all systemic forms of all types of violence against Indigenous women and girls, and to make recommendations to end that violence and to find ways to commemorate our lost loved ones. During the time of the National Inquiry, we heard from almost 2,400 people made up of family members of lost loved ones, survivors of violence, traditional knowledge keepers, elders, frontline workers, academics, a variety of people. And I am so grateful to all of you who shared your truths with us. You rewrote Canadian history by speaking up and speaking out. As a result of the work that we did do, we produced an interim report in November of 2017, and then our final report in June of 2019. We made some controversial findings of fact based on the truths that we heard and the research that our fabulous research team did. We tried to do our work from an Indigenous perspective as much as possible, and also from the perspective that Indigenous women and girls and 2S people, Two-Spirit people, are rights holders. They hold human and Indigenous rights. In the course of our work and our findings of fact, we stated very clearly that Canada is not the country that we thought Canada was and that we were taught Canada was and is. And we also pointed out very clearly that Canada is not the country that the international community thinks we are, because we are not embracers of human and Indigenous rights. And Canada experiences racism. We are not racism free. More specifically, and I have to refer to my notes to make sure I haven't missed anything here, we found a persistent and deliberate pattern of systemic, racial, gendered, and human and Indigenous rights violations by the Canadian state that were designed to displace and eradicate Indigenous people. This pattern of rights violations is the cause of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and is genocide. Genocide that is both historical and ongoing. We used the United Nations finding of genocide, which is more than mass killings. And again, I have to read in the aspects of the UN definition so I don't miss anything. The UN definition of genocide includes killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. We know from our evidence, from the truths that we heard and the research that was done, the residential school system, the 60s scoop, the current foster care system, birth alerts, forced sterilizations, forced relocations of entire nations of Indigenous people, state-imposed and enforced generations of poverty and marginalization, lack of education and inadequate health care, all more than substantiate our findings of genocide, both historical and ongoing. But our report is more than just one word, and that of genocide. We also examined resilience. We examined things that work, programs that work to end violence. So I hope that I've captured a bit of your curiosity. Our recommendations are called for justice, and we made 231 calls for justice. They are aimed at specific groups. And again, I have to look at my notes so I don't miss a group. We made calls for justice aimed at all governments, including Indigenous governments, media and social influencers, health and wellness providers, travel and hospitality industries, police services, attorneys and law societies, educators, social workers and child welfare workers, extractive industries and development industries, police services, correctional services of Canada, and calls for justice specifically aimed at Inuit, Métis, and 2S people. We wrote a separate report with findings and calls for justice regarding Quebec. We also made calls for justice to include all Canadians, so that all Canadians have calls to work on. I want to start, though, with our perspective of human and Indigenous rights violations. One of our calls for justice is directed specifically at that. Our call for justice calls for an Indigenous, National Indigenous and Human Rights Ombudsperson. I'm sorry, I should have read my note from the beginning. And a National Indigenous and Human Rights Tribunal to hear violations of human rights in a timely, effective, and culturally appropriate way, because we know that domestic courts are expensive, take a long time, are very complicated, and in the end, people don't get the remedies they want or need. We also directed calls for justice at educators, specifically our call for justice 11.1 that states, again, I want to read from my note, all education institutions are to educate people about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and 2S people in partnership with Indigenous people, especially Indigenous women, girls, and 2S people. And that education should include historical truths, Indigenous history, Indigenous laws and practices. And we recommend following our education guide called Their Voices Will Guide Us. So moving forward, this begs the question of school boards. Do you have Indigenous people, especially Indigenous women and girls and 2S people from your area, on your board as equal partners? If not, why not? Have you examined your curricula through an Indigenous lens, and have you indigenized your curricula? If not, why not? Here are some starting points for you to do your work. We made other calls for justice, and I'm going to read a few to you so you get a flavor for the work that we did do. As you know, we've called for a national action plan to end violence against Indigenous women and girls. We called for all governments to ensure safe housing, clean drinking water, and adequate food for all Indigenous people. We also called for an annual livable income for all Canadians. We called for changes in Indigenous policing and the child welfare system. We called for all people in media to take a closer look at the images they're portraying of Indigenous women and girls. We called on extractive and development industries to include impact assessments on Indigenous women and girls and 2S people as part of the work that they do to be licensed to move ahead in their developments. We also called on all government agencies to take a decolonizing approach to the work that they do. So what can I do as an individual Canadian? Again, I'll paraphrase our calls for justice because they're lengthy. First of all, we have to call out all types of violence against Indigenous women and girls and 2S people, regardless of where we see it, when we see it, and how we see it. The same applies to calling out racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia, whenever, however, and wherever we see it. All Canadians need to learn the true colonial history of Canada. All Canadians need to read our final report, if not the whole report, at least the final report executive summary. And all Canadians need to hold governments to account, including Indigenous governments, even if that means just vote. You know, we as Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people have never taken the time to really talk to each other and to listen to each other. And that has to change. And we have to change how we do business. We have to change how we think. A paradigm shift, some people call it. We, Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, have to be at all decision-making tables as equal informed partners. And those decision-making tables can be police boards, hospital boards, school boards, arts and culture boards, any board where decisions are being made. They have to be made in partnership and informed partnership with Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. That's where we have to end up, an equal partnership. This is going to take work on both sides. It means Indigenous people have to step up and non-Indigenous people have to make room. But we can do it, one step at a time. We have to do this work. We have to end the genocide, and we have to make Canada the country we want it to be. I'm going to leave you with a final thought. We have to do this work to be informed partners, equal partners, so that Canada becomes the country that we want it to be, and the country we want it to be for our grandchildren and our grandchildren's children. We can do it. Thank you very much.
We talk about how many women were raped last year, not about how many men raped women. We talk about how many girls in a school district were harassed last year, not about how many boys harassed girls. We talk about how many teenage girls got pregnant in the state of Vermont last year, rather than how many men and teenage boys got girls pregnant. So you can see how the use of this passive voice has a political effect. It shifts the focus off men and boys and on to girls and women. Even the term violence against women is problematic. It's a passive construction. There's no active agent in the sentence. It's a bad thing that happens to women. It's a bad thing that happens to women, but when you look at the term violence against women, nobody's doing it to them. It just happens. Men aren't even a part of it. By Dr. Jason Katz, PhD, from his TED Talk, Violence Against Women. It's a men's issue.
Woo!
Heavy. Speechless.
Yeah, we've never sat here in silence. We have some amazing guests coming in right now. We have Charlene Bearhead, who wrote the curriculum for the inquiry, and then we also have two guests from We Matter, the ambassadors from hi. We Matter. It's Gabriella and Marshall. Thank you guys so much for coming. Woo! I know everybody's had some patience today, so we're really appreciating everyone being with us. And tell us about yourself. Make the intros short and sweet, because I know we can find you guys on social media. We need to just get to the conversation and talk about it. It's amazing to have you here.
Okay, I'll just introduce myself right now. Tanse Nitisnigasen Niwao Yaitinisquel. Hi everyone. My name is Four Winds Woman. My English name is also Gabrielle Dawn Jubenville. This is my partner here. He can introduce himself.
Tanse. Hi, my name is Marshall. My spirit name is Kapiana Setnikuso, which means the descendant eagle. I'm from Muskegon Cree Nation, which is up north in Manitoba, and currently residing in Brandon, Manitoba, where I attend university.
And I'm originally from Alberta, from Muskegosuk, Enoch Cree Nation, and I'm currently residing here too. Yeah, I guess we can jump right into it. We definitely went over what's it called? Your document, our toolkit. I guess the question is, I've actually participated in Catholic schools growing up my whole life. And I've had even a couple of experiences that, yeah, it did confuse me. And I guess the question is how are we going to create that safe space, especially for teaching? Because I guess one of my stories is I was in a religion class in grade 10 when I was 15, and the teacher started talking about residential schools, and just kind of, he asked a question saying, how is this, what's it called? He said, how did residential schools work? How were they good? Or something along the line. And other lady raised her hand in my class, and she said, all natives are alcoholics and drug addicts. And like, he didn't even defend or say anything. And my response was, I raised my hand and I just said, you called me and all my family that. And then you know what she said right after that? She said, you are different. So it's just like, I'm just wondering, like, we create these toolkits, even with We Matter, we have these toolkits, but how are we going to make this approachable, especially for the younger youth, to like want to engage? And also even creating like a safe space. I know it's a lot, but I'm asking. And also just, I think too, we need more than just like an office in the school for Indigenous people, and definitely proper education is much needed. So I guess that's what I'm saying. And how can y'all answer that?
Well, I'm just going to say sorry for that teacher's ignorance. But Charlene, Charlene had an intimate moment with me this morning in my pajamas, trying to get on here. But let's introduce Charlene. Tell us first a little bit about maybe why you did what you did with the it's amazing work. If you haven't seen it, look it up. It's beautiful. Talk about what it's called, and then please talk to these amazing youth.
Okay, Abostet Opobinshawia Imigebi. My name is Charlene Bearhead, and I'm actually joining you from just next door to our young friend's original home. I'm in Treaty 6 territory in my home here right now. And so I really appreciate, I'm really happy that we started with the young people speaking. So I'm going to tell you that when we started, I'll start out by saying, when I was invited to do the work, I was at the TRC before that, and the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. And I felt like it was a real honor to be invited to do my small part in the work at the National Inquiry. It's around the education work. And so first of all, although I am the person who wrote, like literally wrote the guide, it's never about one person, and it certainly never about me. I am not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but it was about bringing together enough voices of Indigenous women from across the country to make sure we had some varied perspective, but small enough group that we could get the work done. And so even what you see in the work, although, I really appreciate your kind words, it's really just a very beginning. And to me, anything that we write or anything that we put together as an example, to me, it's as valuable for people who look at it and say, this is really great. Here are some pieces that I can use, and this is helpful, and this would make sense to us in our own territory. I feel like it's just as valuable for people to look at and say, that's really interesting. That would actually never make sense for us in our territory. That's not something that our people would do. That is not how we would talk. These are not our lived experiences, but it still triggers the thought, but for us, it would look like this, or it might be this. You'll see that it's not a series of lesson plans where people get to check off the box, because that is not helpful. As we've just heard, I'd love to have the answer about how we're going to make human beings be better. If I had that, and if we had that answer, we wouldn't be sitting here today. But it's about trying to model as many positive, powerful, courageous, non-whitewashed, non-mamby-pamby sort of things as possible for people, and to really uplift what other people are doing and to feature that and to put it together in a way that can be adapted within the territory or completely changed. But I just want to speak briefly to the title. Like when I was looking at what the title is, Their voices, when I called it Their Voices Will Guide Us, I'm talking about the young people at We Matter, the young people that we're hearing this morning, and the young people all across, it'll be the young ones. They're the most courageous. They're the most willing to take action. And so it was really about that, about bringing as much together as possible, giving some ideas, about giving a critical path to follow for people like the teacher that we just heard about that doesn't even get it, that right there. I mean, the call to action to that teacher is to have the courage to, if nothing else, even if you're not educated, even if you're living under a rock, which must be what's happening if you don't know what's happening to Indigenous women and girls right now for the last 50, 100, 200, 300 years. Even if you've just crawled out from under that rock with your education degree, by all means, recognize the fact that you clearly don't know what's happening. But if nothing else, we don't have to go to university to know what is right, what's acceptable, what is respectful. And so for me, I have to be honest that I'm not a very patient person. And when I hear these calls over and over again, when these horrible things are happening, when people are saying we need more education, why do we need to be educated to be a good human being? I don't get it. I feel like that's a cop-out. I mean, we do need to keep educating people, but when we've got adults in positions of responsibility and authority, I think we need to be calling. So I guess my response to your question about how do we create those safe spaces, I think we need to be really clear in supporting one another and calling out that inappropriate sort of just always looking for excuses. We can't do that anymore. We just have to be really calling that out and saying, you know what, this is not acceptable. This is how we're going to be doing things. And I get asked often, I got asked during the time of the TRC, and I get asked often, during the time of the national inquiry, what are you going to do about all these people who are in denial, who are naysayers? And quite honestly, my response is, I'm going to do nothing about them because we'll try once. We might even try twice. But there are thousands of people. I've truly experienced that there are hundreds and thousands of people who just need to know, who just need the opportunity to come into the conversation, to be invited, to be educated. And so let's focus on them and let's surround the other ones. And, and just create that bigger, safer space. But often people that come from that degree of ignorance and arrogance and privilege do it because they know people are so shocked they won't say anything. And we not give them lots of attention, but definitely call it out. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now.
Oh, no, I totally agree. I feel like we need more influences, especially more Indigenous influencers, like inspiring influencers. I think that's why We Matter is such it's such an important organization, because they give us the tools. And even kind of like right now, I'm writing a blog in collaboration with We Matter about my story about intergenerational trauma. And I'm even also having fears of there's some things in there that, my family might not agree with because they don't want it shine that light on them, that light. And it's kind of scary for me because I'm kind of in this point where I'm in my life where I'm starting to shed light on my story. And it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? And it's just it's also kind of removing most of those people that do bring us down as our communities at times with the lateral violence. And it's just really hard to move forward. And also it's just, I think the only thing we can do is keep on educating, maybe even making toolkits for ourselves, like mental health toolkits to, keep going. And how do we keep pushing along those lines? Because it is a lot of hard work and exhausting, for sure.
Yes, when we sat down and looked at the curriculum together, it was, it was very insightful, how one of the things that kind of stuck out for me personally was the importance of finding their voices and how you do that through cultural teachings, traditional teachings, and those are vital for Indigenous youth to express, especially during that age when they're beginning to their gifts are beginning to surface, and they need to have some form of expression to really let those gifts flourish, and help them find their sense of self and identity. So it was very great to see that. But one of my experiences, I kind of shed light on that in that context, was when we were in I would say middle school. I grew up here in the inner urban. There was a small group of us that were Indigenous, and we were given the opportunity to be taken into like a class with one of the teachers who is basically teaching like cultural values, traditional teachings, like the 7 sacred teachings and all that, which was great. However, it did at times feel superficial, and I guess my question is like, how do we kind of overcome that challenge? Because that is a challenge, right? I truly believe in this work, bringing the curriculum into the education systems to properly teach youth. Although I do believe in that work, I'm also kind of skeptical because I'm worried that we might be teaching. We want to be sure that our Indigenous youth are getting the traditional worldviews that our ancestors taught them. What I'm worried about is if we're delivering this in the education system, which has traditionally been used to assimilate us, will it teach us a superficial culture, or will it teach us the actual values that are important to teach? So.
So you both bring up things that I love. I'm so glad you brought them up because it's actually I like to talk about. So it's like, oh, gee, let me answer that for you. I think that first of all, when you talk about those experiences that happen in high school, do you notice that people say, oh, well, we can't talk about this in the early grades. We have to do this when kids are older. Well, too late, too late. You need to be having these conversations when people are really courageous, when they're 5 or 6. Or 8, right? That's when people are really honest. You know how the elders teach us that the younger you are and the older you are, the closer you are to the Creator, right? And that, so there's that honesty. So I feel like that's one thing we have to start immediately. The second thing, when you talk about that sort of, I call it isolation. When you say Indigenous students got to go to this classroom. Our youngest son, it was interesting to us because it was in Onaway, so you'll know where that is. And went to school, and when we went to his parent-teacher, the teacher said, oh, well, he won't go to these classes where Indigenous kids get to go separately. And we thought, okay, that's weird, because it was one of his uncles that was teaching. And he said, I don't want to go to that because they say only the Indigenous kids get to go. And he said, the white kids need to know too. And one of his friends wanted to learn. So I think that is something that's really important, is all kids need to know this. And then the third thing I just want to address is when you talk about bringing it into curriculum, I totally agree. I have serious issues with the whole superficial thing. And I feel like part of it is the way we talk about it. Do you ever notice that people talk about science and Indigenous ways of knowing?
They're the same thing.
And Indigenous ways of knowing that's nice. There's some stories. That's awesome. And that's not true. It's Indigenous science and Western science. It's Indigenous health practices and Western health practices. So I feel like there needs to be teaching in every curricular area, because I challenge you to find a place in the curriculum or in life where there's not pre-existing Indigenous knowledge, science, practices, protocols, wisdom that supported the best way of life possible on the land with people with relationships from the beginning of time here. I don't get that people have to be Indigenous for that to be relevant knowledge for them. They live on the land with the people. So, I mean, those are some of my thoughts around that.
I'm so excited. I'm usually all over the place. And these guys are like tying me down by my feet. If I was there, I'd be hugging all of you guys like this. Thank you so much. The youth, the voices, everything you just shared was everything I think we were wishing that would come forward, because these are the conversations, and everything you said is happening. The lateral violence in our own communities as Indigenous women saying, hey, we know what's right for us. We know what to do with the funding that you have. right?
Mhm, mhm.
You can now, let's talk about this, because now we have our guides, our elders to show us. And so, just addressing how do we do this? I loved how you were saying, Charlene, be courageous and brave. And it's important to know that we know who we are, and we don't need you to tell us. We're just going to be. And that's why we're so grateful for the grandmothers in our urban communities to say, we can guide you. And when you're, it's to remove the anger when you're talking in that voice of knowing, because it's not that person across from you. And if you can just remove that anger, you can just be so humble. That's who we are as Indigenous people. That's why we're still here. That's why we don't have, the whole, and I don't want to say something wrong here, because I sometimes do with my passion. This is our time as Indigenous people. We're humble, but we're kind of tired of waiting. So step aside, right? Go deal with your stuff in the corner.
Yeah.
And we'll be here when you're ready.
Yeah. And
Right?
Let us do the work. Yeah.
Right?
And let us do it.
Right?
Right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
We love these, right?
Mhm.
So grateful. I don't know if you all want to say a little something.
I just want to say that I work for this Halton Catholic School Board, and I've been here for a few years now. But I can honestly say that when we do have those difficult conversations, I challenge it. I challenge it every single time. I stand up to racism, for injustice, right? And I will not let a teacher go by if they've said something wrong and racist. We talk to them, and we make sure that they are held accountable, because they need to be held accountable. And there's been certain teachers that they've been taught, just like we were taught when we were younger too, that I got the same education that everybody else, that we were the same things that they were talking about in not residential school, but in public school. And so now it's a time that we are Indigenous influencers, and we can take, and we can say, no, we don't need, what you need to do in education is be truthful and to be honest. And then maybe we can start reconciling the past.
I just want to say, Miigwech, thank you for coming on today and meeting you in this kind of way, virtual way. And I've had those experiences within school too, like off reserve, when I went off reserve, like you talked about, like my papers were all marked up in grade 9. A few of us in that class were Indigenous. And if I had white on my paper, it was all marked up, and it was a history class. And, they did that to all of us, and they failed all of us. All of us, we were all in a corner, and we didn't know what to do. So we just got failed. But later on, voices came, young people had voices, and we got rid of those books that they were using because they were racist books. So then, so the culture, the ceremonies, because I didn't like history after that, but the culture and ceremonies and geography all comes into play within the ceremonies, and you understand, and it brings that back out, and that openness. So that's my passion when I'm with young ones, how that all interconnects. It's not just wisdom, love, courage. It's the person's experience about all of those things and how they can bring it into the education system. Because we're on an authority board in our community, and that's what the women did. We came up with the simple terms of reference based on our grandfathers, and that's how we relay it. What's important here at the middle is our children and our future. And I'm glad you're doing the curriculum, and that voice that you have, it's just so wonderful to hear, and that's what's needed. So vegetables, always.
Thank you so much, Nyewangoa, and we hope to be in touch with you soon. We matter. What you are doing over there is amazing work. And we love sharing that within our school board. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
you. Ego say.
We'll see you soon.
Take care.
Take care.
Anin Bojo, Rochelle Richini, Dijanakaz, Sogging Ojibwe Nation, Dopinjaba, Ojibwe Potawatomi, Anishinabekwe, Nindao, Before I begin, I would like to say Chimigwech from the bottom of my heart to Grandmother's Voice for allowing me to honor my best friend and sister, Maisie Ojic, that went missing 12 years ago. September 5th, 2008 was the last time Maisie Ojic and her best friend, Shannon Alexander, were last seen in Kinniganzibi, which is their home community. I told myself the next time that I speak of Maisie, it would be to honor her beautiful spirit that still continues to touch several people's lives to this day, including mine. Not only Maisie, but to all our women and sisters that have been ripped away from us. Maisie was a daughter, a granddaughter, a sister, a niece, and a very close friend to many. Amongst many other names and titles she carried, and would have carried to this day, she was ultimately a strong, resilient, and beautiful Anishinaabe. Now, we can say that about all of our women and our sisters that have been taken from us. And to me, that is a beautiful way of remembering and honoring and respecting the lives of these women. When I think of my own grief, loss, and trauma surrounding the tragic disappearance of Maisie, it makes me think about our women before us, our women now, our young women behind us that are watching us, and the ones yet to be born. Before I continue, I would like to lift up and acknowledge my mother, my grandmothers, my aunties, my elders, my mentors, and all the strong Indigenous women that are currently in my life and that have walked with me for a short time, because you have all guided me, taught me, and gave me lessons to make me who I am today. Our Indigenous women have the inherent responsibility to care, to teach, and to guide within our nations. And that also means we have the responsibility to speak our truth and to make our truth known within the systems that try to silence us, just like our sisters that have been taken from us. I'm here to tell you today that you do not need to pity our people or our women. We will continue to uphold our inherent responsibility and to honor the blood that flows through our veins and the blood that has already been shed. Originally, I wanted to share my personal journey of having Maisie ripped away from us. But it is so important and it is so crucial to your own learning to understand where we were and how it has been to lose our women, to have them ripped away from us, to have them stolen from us, but to also understand and to see what our women are doing now and who we are and who we will continue to be. Everything that I talked about and shared so far has everything to do with who my sister and my friend Maisie was. Maisie was a fighter. She fought for what she believed in constantly, and she fought for the ones that she loved, and she lived a good life. Unfortunately for yourself and for many other people, you have been misinformed through racism, prejudice, and inhumane stereotypes around missing and murdered Indigenous women and my people overall. Unlike my sister and my friend Maisie Ojic, she has been labeled under these stereotypes that I know many of you are aware of and may or may not believe. Regardless of the reasoning for any of our sisters' disappearances, what makes it right to not care for these women just as human beings? Although Maisie specifically was not of the stereotypes of being a person that lives a high-risk life or being a runaway, these reasons should not be less important to anybody or any other person that disappears. We cannot change the past, and we physically cannot bring all of our stolen sisters home. But what we can do together is change the narrative and start telling the truth about missing and murdered Indigenous women. The change really starts with you, because we have always been here. Chimigwech, Gijemnado, all of my relations.
been trying to get you. I got you. I love it. Thank you. You know what? You made it. It's like my life. I'm not even kidding you. If we were together, we'd take care of all kinds of business. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for being here. We don't even have to introduce you. I don't think anyway. But you know, you can introduce yourself.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for having me here. I know we were trying to get things organized. It's really important. I think it's important to, remind people that, yeah, October 4th was yesterday, but this is more than just a one-day awareness thing. You know, we're dealing with something really serious. So for people who don't know me, my name is Pam Palmater, Quainin Deluisi Pam Palmater. I am from the sovereign Mi'kmaq Nation, an unceded Mi'kma'ki, which is on the east coast of Turtle Island, and I'm from Eel River Bar First Nation. I am the chair in Indigenous governance at Ryerson University. I've been a lawyer for about 22 years. I have 8 million cousins, and I do a lot of public education outside of the classroom. So I do podcasts and YouTubes and blogs and public speaking and things like this, because I think that if we just limit it to the classroom, boy, we're going to be in trouble because there's so much catching up to do there. That there's this whole big wide public that needs to know about all of this stuff. Yeah, so
yeah, we creep you. Don't worry, we creep you. We know you.
No, it's good. You know, and people are always asking, what is it that I can do? I don't have any money, or I'm not an activist. And something as simple as sharing reports, publications, videos, podcasts to other people and encouraging them to read it, putting it in classrooms, putting it in discussion, like that's huge. That's education too. You don't really have to think of education as formal. So I always tell people, do two things. One,
just one sec, Pam, I don't know. I'm just going to check something. Your volume or something happened. Like, we can't really hear you that well. Let me just check. Go ahead, say something.
Okay, I've got
Oh, yeah. It's a little better. Yeah, that's good.
Oh, okay. So what I was saying is I always tell people do two things. One, share content from Indigenous people, content that, links to statistics or reports or, ways that you can help. And don't waste time responding to trolls, because some of the trolls are actually paid trolls, and you don't know who you're talking to. So the worst thing I think that we can do on social media for talking about issues like this is to retweet what some racist said, something that's horrible or violent or threatening, and you've now taken that troll's 5 followers and you've made that troll all of your followers, and you've also perpetuated the same racism and hatred that troll was trying to make you do. I mean, they literally instigate you to try to do that. So I think what we can do is silence haters and lift up the voices of those who are doing this kind of good work, like you're all doing. And I think, if everybody's limited in energy, especially during a pandemic, I say let's just put all our energy into good instead of, focusing on these nameless haters. But with the time that I have, and I'm sorry I couldn't join the whole event, we're teaching classes and stuff like that now online. I wanted to talk a bit about the national inquiry from the perspective of government policy and law, because we had the national inquiry, and we only had the national inquiry not because of the government and not because anything was given to us. It was literally all of the families and community members and advocates who for decades, advocated and lobbied in every single forum possible. And that's the thing. We owe this. We owe this acknowledgement, this inquiry to all of these families and all of these advocates. When you think about it, you've got people who are advocating in the streets, having vigils, teachings, and rallies. You have people who are advocating behind the scenes in Parliament and Senate. You all of these women and families who are advocating at the United Nations, at the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, in every single context, with police forces, with lawyers, in individual inquests, within their communities, in their organizations. And I think that doesn't get celebrated enough, the fact that we all collectively made that happen. Our women are often portrayed as weak and vulnerable, and we're not. We're kick-ass warriors. We're strong, we're determined, and yes, horrific things happen to us. And horrendous, almost insurmountable barriers are put before us every single time. But those of us who survive carry all of those voices and all of the lives of those Indigenous women who did everything they could to survive, to bring it forward. And that's why we have this national inquiry. And they need to be celebrated and honored. And I'm glad that there's a date for that. But I want people to really understand this work isn't over. It didn't end with the national inquiry. It's not going to be over because yesterday was October 4th. Everything that the national inquiry talked about and didn't include, because it didn't include everything, we're still faced with today. And I think that the horrible racist death of Joyce Echaquan really symbolizes where we still are in this country. So at first they tried to relegate murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls as, oh, well, that's just their problem. That's their men doing that. And they would, basically throw out fake facts, which thank goodness the National Inquiry dispensed with. But if you look at the other excuses that they use, and they don't always come out as very direct excuses. They're almost like indirect, incognito gaslighting. So first it was them, and let's just say it was all Indigenous men. We know it's not. But that still wouldn't justify violence or murders or exploitation. It wouldn't matter. But we know that the vast majority of Indigenous women in this country, the vast majority, are partnered with non-Native men. I mean, that's just the statistics. Those are demographics that I had to do for my own book, when we were talking about Indigenous identity. So we know, A, it's not all Indigenous men. We know, B, from the follow-up research by media outlets, that more than 50% of the killers weren't even known to the women. It wasn't their spouse or their partner. So, and even if it was, that's no excuse. And then the other thing that they tried to do is say, it's about high-risk lifestyles. And they've got it completely wrong. And these are the messages that we try to tell the National Inquiry and indeed these human rights organizations, that if you make the inquiry about the fault of the women, how do we investigate all of the quote-unquote deficiencies of these women as the reason for why bad things happen, you can never get to a place of justice, because it has nothing to do with the actual women themselves. I mean, you could literally take He-Man and throw him in a pit full of sharks, and now he's instantaneously made vulnerable through no fault of his own. So it's not about our strength or resilience or anything like that. It's about external forces. And what we want as a national inquiry to do is make a different kind of inquiry. Don't look at the women in ways to blame them or paint them as weak or vulnerable, because none of them are. Many of them have survived things that most people could never survive. It's about what are all the different ways in which all levels of government, corporations, and segments of society breach the basic human rights of Indigenous women and girls. And when you turn the inquiry on its head and look at what are those external forces that put women into poverty, that make women homeless, that make them in these situations that weren't of their own choosing, then you're like, oh wow, now we can get at the root causes, and now we have a place to start talking about solutions. And so it's the same thing when you look at a national action plan to address genocide. You can't now revert and say, well, let's make this about educating Native men about domestic abuse. Let's make it about educating women how to eat healthy. Let's make it about, because then you're putting it right back on the victims again as if there's some deficiency in their learning or their thought process, and that is inherently racist, even if people don't talk about it that way. So we need to go right back to what was the root cause, and it was the breaches of all of their human rights from birth and even before that, multiple generations that created these scenarios before someone was even born. And then say, that's what you attack. Oh, so look, gender discrimination in the Indian Act kept them out of their communities and their kids out of their communities for multiple generations. Okay, that's the reason why there's so much discrimination in a band membership context. So we need to fix that law instead of saying, well, the woman chose this or the woman should have done better. So it's really where you look. Never ever look at the women and try to blame them. I mean, because genocide is not our fault. And sometimes we don't even get that. Sometimes we find it hard to forgive ourselves for being colonized or to understand all the ways in which we've been colonized. I mean, think about how it is in some of our communities where not all communities are respectful of their women, or there's higher rates of violence in communities against our women. And you think about what is the cause of that? All of this colonization, or people who have their Indian status or don't, or they have a certain kind of Indian status or don't, and we're judging people as more or less Indian without even realizing this all comes from the colonizers. It has nothing to do with us. So we need to also forgive ourselves for being colonized because it's not our fault. None of it's our fault. We don't live a high-risk lifestyle. And we need to accept that, including all of us who act in service agencies. Think about all the child welfare agencies and, you know, all the shelters and support groups. It's very, very difficult sometimes to keep judgment out of the kinds of services and allyship that we offer. And it's incredibly important that we do, because the locus of blame is not on us. The locus of blame is on the state and institutions and segments of society. And the other really important point is sometimes media determines what gets the most amount of attention in terms of how we address murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. You know, that it's all about foster care system. And the foster care system is massive and huge. Not only does it impact babies, but it impacts the mamas. That's also a form of violence. But the media focuses on children and forgets about the stories of moms. Why do you think mom is depressed or anxious or ends up having addiction when her kids are taken away wrongfully? But if you only focus on one portion of the family, you miss out on the moms. And so even in our conversations about really important things like kids in foster care, sometimes the women don't actually get any of the attention about what's happening. And so we have to be careful. And similarly, we just had months long of protests over police brutality and racialized violence, you know, brutality and killings of Black and Indigenous people. A lot less conversation around police who engage in sexualized violence, human trafficking, or child pornography of Indigenous women and girls. Because that's uncomfortable and they're not quite ready to talk about that yet. Or alternatively, all the attention is on the police. Like, the only segment in society that carries all racism towards Indigenous peoples are police. We don't want to think that our next door neighbor doctors, nurses, orderlies, social workers, you know, all of the people that work in hospitals and healthcare systems can also be just as lethal and just as violent as the police. And we know the story of Joyce Echaquan. It's just one thing. We just got that one video, that one snapshot, that is literally the story of thousands of Indigenous peoples across this country. And who is disproportionately impacted by that? Women who are forcibly sterilized or coerced into having sterilizations or abortions? Women who don't want to have their babies in hospitals because of the child apprehension rates that happen literally right from the birthing room? Women who don't want to go in and have a breast exam or a pelvic exam because of the degradation, the racism, the humiliation, the judgment that healthcare workers will put on this woman, or even deny services. how many of our people have died because of the denial of services. So it's important that people understand violence against Indigenous women and girls in a much broader context. It's not just the killing of Indigenous women and girls. It's also the racism that leads to the death or the harm of Indigenous women and girls, which happens across all of these factors. And so moving forward, one, we have to center the voices of Indigenous women and girls and their families who all brought us here, because we wouldn't be having this conversation were it not for them. And that means they're centered over national Aboriginal organizations, they're centered over political interest groups, they are centered. And number two, that we accept and acknowledge genocide in all the forms in which it comes. There's just no arguing about this anymore. There's no arguing. It's been determined in the United Nations, the Inter-American Commission has told Canada to act, and we need to push for action. And number three is that the National Action Plan focuses on the breach, the root causes of all of this genocide, and doesn't focus on blaming the women or the communities in any way. You know, so they're like, oh, we're going to give capacity development dollars to address genocide. Basically says it's our lack of capacity, of perceived lack of capacity, that means all of this happened. Well, they should give us capacity building dollars because we've got some nation building to do, but not as a response to genocide. They need to end the genocide. And guess who needs to be leading that national action plan? Indigenous women and families and their leaders and their experts. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people who worked on this. The worst thing that could happen, which appears to be happening, is the government behind closed doors is choosing to consult with a couple of Native organizations as they choose and not be centered in the plan moving forward, especially the people who worked so hard to bring it here. So I'm hoping that we can have this conversation in a way that exposes all of the problematic ways that we could go about this. But none of this lays at the feet of Indigenous women and girls. None of it. All of it are from external forces. And that could mean it's your next door neighbors. And that's something that's really disturbing and uncomfortable and we have to deal with. But we have to do in order to save lives, because I guess my last point would be none of this is about political correctness or political offense or being too sensitive to racist comments. We're talking about a denial of service to people that leads in their death or harm or trauma in some way. And that's just got to stop. It's got to stop today. And I think having these forums allows us to really put the spotlight on all of the ways in which the conversation is going off the rails into a direction that somehow always wants to go back and blame the women, and it's not the women.
Yep. You're not done, are you? No.
Well,
we're here.
I'll read off with that, and I knew we had a very short time period. So.
I love it. You know, I'm going to be honest, though, that we are getting some messages that there's some kind of connection problem. But I didn't want to disrupt you. I don't know where it is, but there's something in the sound. We could hear you, but I'm really hoping that it's making people lean in more to really hear you. I don't know what it is, but there was, even now we're getting some feedback. So I don't know, Pam, that might mean you have to do another one with us. You were like so fabulous, and we're really excited to, I think that you're right. It's just time to do it. It's time to do the work. Like, just, and stop blaming us. I'm so tired of it. Like, it's, find something else.
And all the excuses.
Yeah.
Oh, we have to review the document. We'll get back to you. Oh, now it's the election.
Right.
We are in caretaker mode. We can't do anything. Oh, now it's pipeline. So, yeah, we have to talk about pipelines. We can't talk about you. Oh, now it's COVID. Sorry, we can't talk to you because it's COVID. But in fact, with COVID is the very reason, one of the very reasons why genocide should be addressed, because those are all of the risk factors for pandemic. Hello, like, center your pandemic response on responding to genocide, not using it as an excuse to take no action. So we really just got to take all their excuses away and force them into action.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And you gotta follow this woman. I have you on my my, what do you call it, when they're like, oh, here she is again. In the middle of the night, my husband's like, you watching that lady again? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, go to bed watching you. You're just amazing. And I just think that you're such an inspiration for our young women, our women. And I just, I know I appreciate so much for you taking the time to be here for sure, and all that you're doing. And we're just going to keep sharing and sharing and sharing you on our platform. So.
And I don't think I met the lady in the back of the room.
Val? You don't know her?
Have we met before, Val?
Yeah, we have. I was at a couple of missing burden inquiries. Probably just had a few conversations.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry that we can't be doing this in person. You know, it's weird when it's online and you can't really engage with people. But...
Yeah, you'll have to come for our next one. Yesterday we had a really beautiful afternoon with at Crawford Lake, and it was unreal. So we'll invite you the next time with all the grandmas and the Indigenous women in our community. It'd be great to have you there. All right.
I appreciate being part of it.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
You are amazing. You are. So yeah, I know I'm here. We have to thank these very patient, beautiful girls. I am sorry, but you're following some really important women. But now that we've gotten to the most important women, we'd love to hear from you. Introduce yourself. We had you on with our National Indigenous Peoples Day event. You guys were so cute, man. Like, what you do is just awesome.
Thank you very much.
You know, we're just, I think we've decided that next time, because we do such a good job of bringing people together, we're going to hire somebody professionally. So if anybody's out there listening, we're done with this technology stuff on this end, because we know we have some really great things to talk about. But I'm going to see if I can say your name. Is it Tyranny? No.
Tannerik.
Sorry, go ahead.
Tannerik.
Yes, I knew there was a thing in there. Talk to us. You're going to sing, you're going to do some throat.
Yes, so today we're going to throat sing. So we are Inuit throat singers, and we've been performing since we were 10 years old, and now we're 16, and we've performed worldwide, and we're very grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you. We're so grateful. I just love this. I know my mom's sitting at home waiting for you.
Okay, so I guess we can start?
Sure, yes, please.
Okay. So unukut, unusakut, uvanga Samantha, kutak makaf, uvanga 16, arumamiu tayunga, katajo sunguyunga, atatagan nati mutabini, ananaha ibiajuk mutabini.
Umbisi ubanga kiana nakagafre, ukiuka kulik nisuyo. Hello, my name is Caroline. I'm 16 in grade 11, and I love to throat sing. My dad is French Canadian, and my mom is Scottish and Inuit, and together we are Tannerik.
Tannerik means two souls.
Throat singing is traditionally done by two women or girls. Whoever laughs or messes up first loses.
We learned throat singing at Ottawa Inuit Children's Center when we were 2 years old.
The first song that we'll be doing is called The Poor Little Dog. The story behind the song is that a girl had a pack of pups, and everyone told her that the runt of the litter would die through the winter. So she sang the song every night to the pup for strength and encouragement. Then he became the leader of the pack.
But no, the next song that we will be doing is called Love Song. It is a lullaby for the babies, and this song originates from Baker Lake.
But no, the next song that we'll be doing is called Iu'a. This song is the 3 vowels of our Inupiat alphabet.
Yeah, and this, yeah. Yeah, thank you. The last song that we will be doing is called Hama. This is the most basic girl song, and it is the first song that we ever learned.
Nakumi.
Thank you, Nakumi.
We're loving
Thank
this.
you.
We're sitting down. You know, this is why we were like, these girls gotta be at the end to put us into this light space and loving feeling. And we're very grateful for you.
We are so very grateful for this opportunity. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience for waiting. And
Yes.
we'll be in touch, and I'm sure we'll be doing more things together.
Oh yeah, of course. Okay, I guess this is the wrong way.
No, we see it. You're right. Ah, you did it backwards.
Properly?
You're so
Properly? Good?
perfect. Yes, you guys are so cute. You got it. Thank you, girls. Thank you, ladies. All right, we'll stay in touch.
Have an amazing day.
Thank you.
Thank you, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
How do I get this turned around again?
No, well, we love this. Yes. There you are. Yes.
Hello.
Thank you for your patience, you guys. We're gonna get this, but you know, it's just them having you here. It doesn't matter. We're all good. It's the sound and what we see.
Oh, the sound?
No, we're good. I'm just saying we're here. We see it all. We're.
Okay, you're good.
Are you guys good? We see kind of your face. There we go.
All righty, here we go.
Yes. Look at that beautiful sunshine.
Yeah.
Tribal Vision, we love you.
Thank
you
for having us.
Thank you for always supporting the work that we're doing and bringing your art and love and presence. Woo!
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks for. This was an amazing day, an amazing couple hours spending with you folks in virtual land. We just want to say thank you for always being there for us, and our communications team for always being there as well. You know, we have just a few moments to recap, and I think one of the things that really resonated with me was the conversation yesterday with the grandmothers and the Indigenous women that are in Halton as well as in our surrounding area. It was very, very powerful, and we left yesterday with warm and full hearts, but also a sense of urgency that this is something that really needs to be taken seriously from all levels of governance.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just really overwhelmed with the support that we get from the people that know the work needs to be done. And I loved all the messages. We need to hear those messages because doing this work was and is very challenging. And I think that, you know, the reason we go through our healing is to make us stronger so that we can and we are capable of facing, you know, all of the issues that stand in our way and those barriers that have been created to keep us where we are. And even as an urban Indigenous woman, I never thought for a minute that I would, you know, I had to ever worry about that. But, you know, I think the minute that I said that I was Indigenous in my own community, all of a sudden it was, I was looked at differently and treated differently. And so the messages today, when I look back at what we just created today and the messaging from our relatives that came to support us, it's going to be really beautiful because I think that's how we get our energy to move forward and keep going. And the support that they offer us and remind us that you're doing what you're supposed to do, even if you do make people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because we're not here to make anybody uncomfortable. Yeah. We're here to just share the truth and heal our generations. And this woman is amazing. One of the most amazing women that we spend time with on a regular basis. And I'd love for her to finish off this beautiful day and the last month that we've done this work together. Val?
I just want to say to you, Gretch, for joining us, and I think what I've witnessed and experienced the last couple of days is when I'm in this space talking about missing and murdered Aboriginal women and girls and Two-Spirited, it's not here, it's physical in the spiritual sense. It's a different type of energy, and just, I can't explain it. But anyway, me and my girls, the first song that came to us was about the women. And if we're willing to listen, they are on the outside of the path, and of the physical path, guiding us, telling us to help us. And I really felt their presence the last couple of days here because we were talking about them, and they're guiding us. And I think that Jody and Sherry have done some brilliant work and fast. And I'm amazed by it, of all the people that came together, willingly came together, fast and quick, but quality. And even though Jody's saying the technical part, I'm terrible at technical. She just amazes me, But I think it was, something that I witnessed that would have taken months to do. But it's like Pam said, and some of the messages from yesterday, and what I've been seeing on Facebook, it's like, oh yeah, okay, the report's there, but it's on the shelf. It's this and it's that and it's this and it's. My daughter posted yesterday, I don't care if Trump has COVID. This is important about what's been happening to our women and the reminder that happened this last week, and let's get to it. And this is getting to it. And that's what I felt coming across today. And I really want to thank all the speakers that came on. Is that we're getting to it. We're getting to it, and we're not waiting for funding or this or that. We're getting to it. So miigwech for your calls.
That's our new hashtag, getting to it. We're talking about hashtags. We're learning so much today. I just, we have done a few things, and I just would like to bring them up before we go, since we have this opportunity. Thank all of our partners, our community partners. I know we just vaguely said the school boards in the areas, but it's the Halton Catholic District School Board. Anna Percaston, she was our superintendent last year, and she was amazing. And I hope she's watching this, because she believed in what Sherry and I were talking about, and she embraced it, and she just taught us so much, and she really taught us to actually stand in our strength and power as women. And so, for you.
To the Halton, to the Niagara Catholic District School Board, Brian Kahn. Hamilton Wentworth Catholic School Board, Melissa Button. Waterloo Catholic District School Board, Tammy Webster. St. Clair Catholic School Board, Courtney Gore. Windsor Essex Catholic School Board, Darlene Marshall. Big shout out to Crawford Lake, the whole team out there, especially Brenna Bartley. The Halton Regional Police. And to all our community relatives who are displaying the red dresses and sharing the information. Our ancestors, our elders and grandmothers, aunties, uncles and brothers, and our sisters and our children and their coming faces. Thank you so much for joining us.
And let me just share a couple of our, what we started today with this, yesterday and today, and actually started a month ago or so, is we have the campaign for a petition for our women now. And we started this campaign to try to ask for a living monument for our sisters in spirit. And we do know that there are monuments across Canada and some nations, and they have some stone monuments, and they also have, I think, a totem pole just went up. Beautiful, beautiful. But when we were really talking in our space, it came that they really deserve a living space that can serve everyone, from the sisters in spirit to the families that were left behind. And so that's our petition, and you can find that on the change.org, and it's MMIWG Living Monument. If you could sign that and share that, we're going to be working from today until November 25th, which is the International Femicide. We're going to be working and pushing and getting people to move forward and be responsible for their own calls for justice. We have some hashtags and some Instagram you're going to be watching and seeing. But until then, you'll notice that a couple of the people had held up some pages like this that has their their calls for justice. This is what we're asking people to do, is to do your call for justice. Take a picture of just you like this with your call for justice, and send that to our Instagram or our Facebook page, anywhere that you'd like to. Apparently all of you guys have my cell phone number, so you can send that to. We've been saying things the whole time we've been on here. But hashtag Our Women Now, hashtag FORMMIWG 2S, our school boards, anywhere. Just start sharing that, please.
And here's my calls for justice. And I will always stand up for injustice.
And another big shout out to all of our communication staff. You guys are awesome. And soon enough, hopefully we'll be able to do this, our next one, live from the school board, where you can manage this platform. We'll see you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.